Hello and a warm welcome to this week's Captains of Industry. I'm Bronwyn Nielsen. Joining me in the hot seat this evening, Clive Thomson, the CEO of Barloworld. Clive, it's always a pleasure to chat. I want to go back to 2006 when you took over as CEO of Barloworld. 2007, the group moved into a clear restructuring phase. How did you begin that operation? Did you take a look at the group as a whole and say, listen, we've got to batten down the hatches, we've got to refocus what we actually do here?
Yes, Bronwyn, essentially that's what it was about. It was refocusing on our core businesses, which were our distribution businesses, which we had sort of been in with Caterpillar since 1927. And over time, the group had become very diverse, become essentially an industrial conglomerate. And the feeling was strategically we needed to refocus on our core. And therefore we unbundled Freeworld Coatings and PPC and sold off a couple of our international businesses and really repositioned the group as a distributor of leading global brands.
Did you have buy-in from management straight away, having just gotten to the top job and then suddenly restructuring the group? Was there any pushback at that point?
Look, there were a couple of decisions that we said we would subject to strategic review. So certain areas of our business we didn't take a decision on day one, but by about May of 2007 we announced finally to the market. And by that stage I really interfaced with my executive team, and although I had my own views, I think by the time we announced everything publicly, my executive team was with me and we were all headed in the right direction.
Do you think also you potentially had buy-in right from the beginning because you had been part of the Barloworld story for such a long time, although in different positions?
Yes, correct. And you know, there were a number of changes in people over that time, particularly those divisions that we shed. But I think all the rest of the executives I'd worked with over an extensive period, and I think we had been through strategic planning processes and we were pretty much on sides as to what needed to be done to reposition the group.
How would you describe Barloworld today?
It's still a diverse industrial in the sense that we operate in 27 countries around the world in a number of different industry segments. You know, we focused on mining, but also infrastructure, power systems, materials handling, agriculture, logistics. So
industrial conglomerate, does the description fit?
I wouldn't use the word conglomerate anymore, because I think although they are quite diverse businesses focused on different industry sectors, they're all about distribution, essentially distributing new and used equipment and providing product support solutions for that equipment. And whether that's motor vehicles or Caterpillar equipment or Hyster forklift trucks or Massey Ferguson tractors, the business model is fairly similar. And that's where I think the strategic logic of the grouping hangs together.
You mentioned that you are in 27 countries, 5 continents in terms of the Barloworld picture, and it follows that I'm going to use you as a barometer of what exactly is happening in the world at the moment. As we know, there's so much uncertainty and people actually don't know where we are going. So from what you're seeing on the ground, let's start geography by geography, just to say, are you getting a holistic picture that things are going to be fine, or are there certain territories that are in dire straits?
Yes, I think maybe if I tackle it geography by geography, because I think the picture is very different depending on where in the world we are. And
which is great, because you diversified and it
balances the risk.
A barometer, yes, absolutely. Balances the risk, exactly.
And look, I think if I start off on the positive areas, Southern Africa is going very well for us. You know, there's a lot of mining and infrastructure needs through the continent. And you know, I remember an Economist article a number of years back talking about Africa, the hopeless continent, and now that's changed to Africa, the land of opportunity, and we're seeing that tangibly on the ground. I think the other area is Russia, another one of the sort of BRICS, where mining activity is strong, oil and gas activity is strong, and infrastructure activity is strong. I think the areas where we're seeing the most weakness is in Europe, and
well, that's no surprise. That's
no surprise. It's linked to the Eurozone crisis. And you know, we've got a presence in Spain, Portugal, Belgium, Holland, and the United Kingdom. And I think all of those we're seeing sluggish growth at best.
And you have for some time. I think I remember chatting to you about Spain a while ago, and that's been pretty much a beleaguered territory for the group for a long period of time, or is that unfair?
I would say since things started slowing there in about April 2008, but came off a cliff when the Lehman crisis ensued just post-September 2008. So this is about the 4th year, I would say, we've had pretty difficult conditions in Spain. Yeah.
So what happens now? How do you what remedial action do you take to make sure that you stay in that territory, or do you even consider pulling out?
Yeah. Look, we're not considering pulling out, and the reason for that is that we distribute the Caterpillar brand there. We've had a relationship with Caterpillar since 1927. And I think what we realize, particularly in the industries we serve, is they are cyclical. I mean, the construction cycle, as we know, goes through highs and lows, the mining cycle the same. And so you really have to take a long-term view on your business. You know, from about the mid-90s in Spain till 2007, we had 14 years of uninterrupted growth. And at the peak, we were making a lot of money in Spain. For all the reasons we know, both the infrastructure cycle and the residential construction cycle has collapsed in Spain, and you know, the yellow metal industry has collapsed similarly. So we're going through difficult times, but it will turn. I mean, I can't give you absolute picture of when, because Europe remains constrained. But all you've really got to do in these times then is manage your business accordingly. And it's been an unfortunate reality, but we've had to take out about 50% of our headcount in Spain over the last 4 years to manage the cost base.
Well, let's bring it to home. As you say, construction is cyclical and so is mining, but I want to focus on the construction story for a moment in South Africa and potentially in Africa. Right now in South Africa, that construction story is hanging in the balance. Margins are depressed. We see negative news flow on a couple of companies, and there's not much hope that we're going to see that cycle kicking up anytime soon. Of course, there is the public sector spend that everybody's waiting to come online. Where do you see this cycle turning? Is it on the horizon, or are we still some way off?
Look, it's a good question, and obviously in the lead up to 2010 with the Soccer World Cup, there was a boom in activity, and we benefited from that. But there's been a slump since that time, and I think if you look at the construction companies, most of them are still pretty subdued in terms of the immediate prospects. But I think if you look to the medium term, South Africa needs infrastructure spend. The rail capacity, the port capacity, the road capacity. We need more in order to lower the cost of doing business in the country and move forward on a stronger growth trajectory and create jobs. And I think the government is committed to it, and I think we will see it coming through on time. I mean, it's not, well, coming through, perhaps not as quickly as people would like, but I think in the medium term, infrastructure spend will rebound, and we will be well placed to be a beneficiary of that when it happens.
It obviously is a key feeder into the Barloworld story. You are intimately linked to the construction space. Yes.
In the Caterpillar business in Southern Africa, historically about 50% of our revenues have been infrastructure related and about 50% mining related. But over the recent years, we've seen infrastructure spending come off and mining expenditure increase. So at this point in time, it's skewed about 70-30 in favor of mining and away from infrastructure.
Now let's look at the mining story in light of those numbers. We've seen a number of platinum miners closing down their mines, considering the pressure that they are experiencing right now. It doesn't look as though we're seeing any positivity coming out of the likes of an Anglo-American, Kumba Iron Ore, etc. All of them are leading up to a bad news story at the moment. Is it a dismal picture, or do you think that this is just a temporary pullback and then we're going to see everything come back online?
Yes. Look, it is relative, Bronwyn, because 2012, this year, will be the highest number of mining unit deliveries we've made since the last record, which was in 2008. So we're coming off what for us is an all-time record, and I think the slowdown must be seen in that context. I think the other important point I would make.
So you're saying be aware of the base effect here.
Yes.
This time it's off a positive base, and that could basically exacerbate the downtrend.
It could exacerbate the downtrend, but also bear in mind, you know, if you were seeing a downtrend off a weak base, it would be one thing, but a slight slowing off a record base is still not a catastrophe for us in terms of overall mining unit deliveries that we're expecting. And I think also we've got diversity in country risk and also commodity exposure. So you make reference to platinum, which is absolutely right. We've seen a number of closures, but a large part of the platinum mining industry in South Africa is underground, and we play in the main in surface mining equipment. So our impact on through the platinum slowdown is fairly muted. Where we're still seeing some reasonably good growth prospects are in coal, for example, and that's quite a big part of our business.
Is that the mainstay of your mining business, would you say? Would you go so far as to say that coal's the mainstay?
I wouldn't say the mainstay, but it's one of the biggest, together with diamonds, iron ore, and copper. Although copper is outside of South Africa, and that was going to be my next point, is the country diversity that we have, because at the moment Mozambique is booming in terms of the the coal expansions in the Tet region in northern Mozambique. That's the Vale and Rio Tinto projects there. And then we're also seeing pretty robust activity in the Zambian copper belt, and also just across the border into the Katanga province of the DRC, and that's based on copper and cobalt.
Mozambique, Zambia, DRC, in terms of the Africa story, how broad are you on the continent at the moment?
We operate throughout southern Africa. It's basically from the Congo, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, all the way south. So we're also in places like Angola, Angola, but also Namibia and Botswana. And some of those, Angola, for example, is more driven by infrastructure than it is by mining. There we've got about 30% of our revenues mining-based and 70% infrastructure. And again, there's still a real deficit of infrastructure in Angola on the back of many years of civil war that is only slowly being rebuilt. So again, the prognosis there in the medium term is pretty good.
Recently, I chatted to Mark Kutafani, the CEO of AngloGold Ashanti. Obviously, they've got a big growth story into Africa, and he was throwing forward to the fact that he basically goes on the ground in country as they expand on the African continent. He's very hands-on. Do you have a similar management style when it comes to the African continent?
Yes, we're taking our whole board up to northern Mozambique just later this month. We're flying into the Tet province to have a look at our equipment working on the mine site there, and then we're down to Maputo to see a newly opened facility that we've done. And I think it's very important to get in front of the customers, understand what the customers' needs are, so that when big strategic decisions are coming to the board, you've got a real sense of the underlying detail in order to know strategically whether these are the right things to be supporting and allocating capital to.
Over and above the African continent, the 27 countries, do you spend your life on a plane?
I probably spend 60 or 70 nights out of the country a year. It's less than I was doing in 2007 when we did the major restructure, but it's still a lot. So I'm regularly in Russia, in Spain, in the UK, in the US, and in Africa, in different parts of Africa.
In terms of the teams that you deploy for your offices, your Barloworld offices, do you use South Africans, or do you go in-country and draw staff from the territories that you operate in?
You know, it's a mixture, and I think when one initially goes into a territory, you need to take some expat skills with you in order to develop the locals in terms of the knowledge and the Barloworld way of doing business. But I think it's very important in time to bring what we call localization outside of South Africa, because it's often the locals that have the real understanding of the way in which doing business. In Russia, there's language skills, and also often the real relationships with the customers sit in the locals. So it's really a combination of the two.